of this falseness. Plato called this a genaion pseudo, or a noble lie. Centuries later, Agnes Heller would modernize this statement, arguing that every society needs a self-image in order to survive as a society, and that the inherent value of that self-image lies not in its factuality, but in its relevance for the people who seek its reflection. One could say that she answered the question that Leo Strauss raised in his critique of Karl Popper's The Open Society and its enemies. Do we need magnificent myths to give our lives meaning and purpose and to secure the stability of society? Do we need the noble lie? According to our modern opinion makers, the only justifiable answer to Strauss' question is, of course not. For decades, European intellectuals have put all their artistic and academic efforts in deconstructing or destructing those myths we gullibly held sacred. Our culture was nothing but a product of our imagination. Traditions were merely invented, and traditional values were the ideological justifications for the dominance of the ruling class. For centuries, we had been deceived, and the deceit of the elite led us to the self-conceited enforcement of Western civilization on the globe, to the blood-wrenched battlefields of World War I, and finally to the gas chambers of Auschwitz. By freeing ourselves from those myths and lies, we not only distance ourselves from the past, we created a new society based on individual freedom. For the first time in history of man, we are free to live our lives the way we want to. Or, as Bart Simpson puts it so eloquently, I quote, "We don't take crap from anyone and we do what we feel like." Take that, noble lie. Doesn't always have to be Plato, you know. I also have my sources of wisdom. At this point, Theodore Dalrymple entered the stage. With remarkable wit and astonishing accuracy, he dissected that new moral paradigm and presented it for what it really is, another ideological fallacy. A fallacy that permitted artists and intellectuals to propagate absolute freedom in every domain of life. Moral relativism became the campfire around which all those atomized individuals desperately seeking answers could gather. We retreated in social apathy and we watched the dancing shadows on the wall, mistaking them for reality. However, there is no objective reality we can decipher solely through our own rationality. Reality as we experience it, as we live it, is shaped by ideas. And the idea of moral relativism is not without consequence. It determines our way of living, our social relations, our conduct of affairs. In other words, it determines our society. And if that idea turns out to be intellectually shady, to say the least, it will have its effects on society. We did not abolish the noble lie. We've replaced it. Unfortunately not with another noble lie, but with an ignoble lie. The illusion of the totally autonomous individual, freed from all social constraints, who makes his own moral rules as he goes along, did not lead to social harmony. Instead, it led to the devastation of human life in what we now know as the underclass. The middle and upper class, on the contrary, paid homage to the idea of moral relativism, but actually hypocritically restrained themselves according to the traditional values that have structured Western civilization for centuries. Life at the bottom, indeed. But isn't individual freedom then the most valued and most important legacy of modernity? Aren't we all in debt to the liberal idea that it is the freedom of each individual to live his life as he deems fit? Of course. No man in his right mind would argue that individualism is to be abandoned. But for an individual to be free, we need freedom. Moral relativism and absolute individualism have taught us that we are all free individuals. But does that make us free? Free in the sense of Milton Friedman's or Friedrich von Hayek's formulation of freedom? I do not believe so. For what has society become? but an enormous mass of individuals, all equal and alike, restlessly seeking to fulfill their petty and trifling pleasures. Each individual forms his own small and insignificant little world, where his friends and family are the whole of humanity. Despite his interaction with other people, he barely notices them, let alone recognizes their existence. For him, there is no society, only social relations. Above this vast ocean of egocentric individuals rises an all-powerful state that guarantees the individual's well-being and accompanies him from the cradle to the grave. The all-embracing state regulates with gentle hands the human existence into its most private extent. Each individual is happy and content as long as he's been cared for and as long as he has no need to fixate his attention, ambitions and capacities to anything else than his own existence. The state satisfies all possible physical needs, organizes his labor, and arranges his personal life through an impressive arsenal of family and inheritance laws. The individual is left with no other strains than the burden of living. And while the state attaches the individual to itself, it attempts to control society by encompassing it through a complicated labyrinth of detailed and uniform regulation that discourages even the most resilient minds. There is no force, only restriction. There is no oppression, only thwarting. The state does not tyrannize, it blunts. It reduces society to a flock of sheep, desperately seeking the guidance and protection of the shepherd state that relieves the individual of all responsibility. And if an individual is not responsible for his own actions, he must be the victim of circumstances. We feel the constraints of that invading state power in everyday life. Our freedom in simple matters is restricted and curtailed. The government tells us when to mow our lawns, whether we can or cannot use canned olive oil, which opinions are accepted and which should be disregarded. Mine should be disregarded. Which values we should teach our children in school, which trees we should plant and which food we should eat. I always eat the food that I shouldn't eat. It's my form of resistance. It doesn't drive us to despair. It doesn't cause us to rebel or revolt. It solely frustrates us up to the point where we relinquish every individual initiative and surrender in acceptance of our fate as just another brick in the wall. And there we find comforting solace in the knowledge that we are at least an individual brick in the wall. Is that freedom? Is that the individual ability to make free choices without constraints? I don't think so. It's almost literally the dystopia that Alexis de Tocqueville described in 1835 and that seems frightfully accurate today. I believe the significance of Theodore Dalrymple's writings lie exactly in the exposure of this ideological masquerade. With every essay, another sham of political correctness is debunked. At the turn of the century, this was unheard of, maybe even unthinkable. Dr. Dalrymple was one of the first to voice an opposing opinion in a compulsive intellectual climate. He had obstacles to overcome and still is as much praised as loaded. But as Oscar Wilde said, an idea that is not dangerous is unworthy of being called an idea at all. A provoking idea will stir controversy. That is inevitable. Intellectual nonconformism is not for the faint-hearted, but it is imperative. Eternal vigilance, ladies and gentlemen, is the price of freedom. The Liberty Award has been granted to one of its most dauntless advocates, and I congratulate him for it. Thank you very much.